going to go ahead and introduce Michael Naylor. So Michael is the director of the main Enneagram Center for Transformation and Wellbeing. He is also a professional change coach and an Enneagram Institute faculty member. He is a licensed addiction therapist and clinical supervisor. He is an International Enneagram Association professional member and teacher. And he is an author of the book, The Alchemy of the Enneagram in Transforming Addiction. I want to add that Surrender School, kind of a sister to Friendly Circle Berlin, Michael is doing a book study for us that begins September 9th. And so between the type information that he's going to give you here and the book study where we're actually studying the alchemy of the Enneagram with Michael at Surrender School, so please come. Tied to that, I do office hours for this book study and also for you guys if you want to come at 8 a.m. on Monday and Thursday. And so come anytime, ask whatever questions. If I can't answer them, I'll reach out to Michael, see if he can, because he certainly can, I'm sure, even if I can't. At the bottom of Michael's email, he has this quote, and I'm going to basically read it just before I hand it off to Michael. Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It is a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present with the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. And now I'm going to hand it off to Michael.
Yeah, so welcome everyone, and thank you, Cheryl, for that introduction. And today I want to talk about the type 8, and I'm going to try to create a structure that helps you understand how to work with your type as you learn it as we go along. First, I just want to introduce, this is the book that we'll be using for the self-study, and a lot of the ideas in there we'll talk about today, particularly the type 8. And then this is my family, my wife, daughter-in-law, daughter and son, quite a lovely group. And here's the granddad over here. And then Felix, who's been a new arrival. He's been around for 5 years, but he still feels pretty darn brand new. And then my faithful dog, Pema. And my home is in Maine, southern Maine. And this is this is in my neighborhood. And then, of course, Bernie Sanders visits from time to time because he's a good bud. So using the Enneagram, what's the purpose of it? It's to understand our types' patterns. There's 9 types, and each type has a slightly different variation of defense patterns that they have learned as little boys and little girls. And so part of the work here is to see and understand them so as to transform the less healthy ones, and then also to really assist us in realizing that our personality patterns are really another form of addiction. Don Riso, who is my teacher, said, the first addiction is to our personality patterns, where we're over-identified with certain habits we developed as little ones. So the goal and the hope is to awaken authenticity and our heart of compassion. And ultimately, my experience has been as people open up and begin to sense more deeply beyond their patterns, is they also awaken within them a real wish to serve others that comes through the capacities of their type. So this is review for some of you have seen it before in the first presentation, but we have 3 centers we talk about. The red center here is the instinctive center, and it's from this center that we're able to sense the body. Heart center, or the emotional center, is where our experience of compassion, gentleness, kindness can be found. And the head center has everything to do with being curious, open, exploring, whatever the topic is. So one of the things I just remind you is that this isn't a dogma or a religion. So it's really important that you discern what makes sense to you and what doesn't. Take what you need and leave the rest. And, the ultimate conversation around the head center is, if you're working the steps and you happen to do the 11th step where you develop quiet mind, well, you're in for advanced learning as a result of that. So And then we have kind of this joke about the centers. And so this guy's on the couch and his head is saying to himself, get up, you should get to work. And his body's saying, nope, not today. So part of the learning about the centers is realizing we have almost like three voices in us that aren't always in harmony with each other. So we'll talk more about that. So the transformation practice is this idea of learning to observe yourself with radical compassion rather than judgment. That seeing my patterns and noticing how they occupy me without beating myself up and without trying to change them in the moment, but seeing them like an objective scientist is what starts to break the trance of the pattern. So we'll talk more about that. And so if being hard on yourself worked, it would have worked by now, long ago. So it really is this journey of trusting that I can actually observe my patterns with compassion without trying to change them, that actually changes them. So we have, this is the Balrog in the Mines of Moria, if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings. And the symbolism of it is that, navigating our tight patterns sometimes is like taking on a Balrog that's very powerful. So one of the things that happens for people when they learn about their types patterns, they naturally assume that since I know what my patterns are, I should be able to change them, at least in 2 weeks, right? But the patterns don't really care if you know about them or not. There's a way that we have to develop a kind of counterintuitive way of working with them to get the patterns to lose some of their hypnotic pattern, their hypnotic power. So I start with this symbol, the AA symbol, unity, service, and recovery, and you've got a triangle in the middle of a circle, which is identical to the Enneagram symbol, except that with the Enneagram symbol, we have the triangle and the circle, and then we have this funky little thing called the hexad, which is our conversation is you're either moving in the direction of growth or you're moving backwards. But it's only to say that the AA symbol had an origin, came from this Enneagram symbol. So why use the Enneagram? Well, the thing I've learned over time is that people often lack the necessary understanding regarding predictable crisis of spiritual growth that they will encounter as they deepen their own personal growth. So people come in and they start working the steps, start getting healthier, and then all of a sudden they start encountering what might be called material that's been in our shadow, that we couldn't see. So we do this inner work, we start to, get our lives in a place of integrity, and then lo and behold, it's like, ghosts start coming up from the basement. Things that we're being asked to digest and heal that may have come from early childhood, or, grade school, or our years as an adolescent. So the Enneagram posits that these things are natural occurrences of evolution, and as the healthier that we get, the more we actually have the capacity to transform deeper and more difficult patterns. So sometimes people in recovery will all of a sudden hit one of these, what might be called shock points, and go, gee, I've done all this work and I feel worse than ever. What am I doing wrong? And likely is you're doing nothing wrong. You're just being required to learn another way of transforming internal patterns. So one of my two teachers, Don Riso and Hudson, would say the process of growth entails an ongoing cycling among letting go of old blockages, opening up to new possibilities in ourselves, and then encountering deeper levels of blockage and suffering. Now, most people don't get cheered up by that idea, but in fact, if you've been on the journey here for a while, I know for myself, about every third year I am pointed towards new and unseen parts of my internal being that I didn't know were there. And usually it's followed by a humility experience where suddenly I'll realize, oh my God, I've been doing this one pattern. I've been sober now 40 some years, and I'm just seeing this one pattern I've been doing unconsciously for 30 years that ends up alienating some of my best friends from me. So that's not the most fun to see, but it allows me to start to change it. So although we might wish that spiritual growth would be more linear, meaning going from point A to point B, and that it could be accomplished in one or two major breakthroughs, the reality is that it is a process that we must go through many times on many different fronts until our whole psyche is reorganized. And what does that mean? Well, when I first entered counseling, and I was dealing with my family of origin and the alcoholism there, and, I spent a couple of years in counseling. I thought, wow, I've handled those issues. This is great. Then lo and behold, 4 or 5 years later, I discover, there's deeper levels to these patterns. I got to go back and revisit them and develop a deeper understanding. They affected me a lot more powerfully than I realized. And then I figured, wow, I'm done with that. I've done my 10 years of therapy. I'm good to go. And, 5 years go by, and all of a sudden, I'm noticing deeper aspects of the same patterns that I have got to navigate and heal. So it's this idea that we're always moving down and inward, and it's like a spiral. We take care of a pattern, then we meet it again on another level, and we go down and down until we actually finish it. So the problem, what I noticed, is that most change attempts in recovery revert back to the initial habits that one has acquired to get sober, right? So, and this happens in all walks of life. So let's just say people, you come into recovery, you work your steps, you become a sponsor, you're an active member. And about, 10 years down the road, you've had the luxury of never having to dip into childhood suffering. But all of a sudden, something opens up and you're face to face with all of the grief, anger, rage, shame you experienced when you were 10 years old. So going to more meetings and sponsoring more people does not handle that specific suffering. And that's one of the things that I really focused on when I wrote the book, is that, my recovery program prepares me to be able to deal with these arising sufferings that I've never, experienced before consciously. So we need both. We can't just, you can't throw out the baby without, with the bathwater. So there's a tendency, for all of us, that when something has worked in the short term, that we rely on it over and over again for whatever comes up emotionally. So there's a mysterious gravitational force within us that pulls us back to the start. And there's more I can say about that when we talk about the levels of health. So I think of recovery as navigating a labyrinth. When I first learned about recovery, it's like I saw the end point, this stone in the middle, and I thought, this is a direct shot. This will take me about 2 weeks. And then I started, navigating the labyrinth, and it pulled me out to the side and then backwards and in and then out and around and back and around. So it wasn't linear. And they didn't also tell me there were trap doors that I would fall through and have to resurrect from. So this symbol of the labyrinth is a great example of sort of an archetype of how change occurs. So the goal of recovery in my world is aligning and awakening the 3 centers. I'm here, awake, and inhabiting my body. What does that mean? That means as I'm sitting here and breathing, I can feel the energetic flow through my hands, through my arms, through my trunk, through my legs when I'm present. My heart's open and receptive. What does that mean? That means that when someone suffers, I actually feel their suffering. Or if I'm hurt, my heart feels that suffering. Or if I feel a sense of affection for someone, it comes through my heart center, so my heart is awake. And then my mind is clear and still. And what does that mean? That means that, if you are just sitting here listening, you may have noticed that there's an internal flow of thoughts going all the time while you're trying to listen to the words I'm speaking. We would call that the monkey mind. And so part of the work is to learn how to develop the capacity to drop into quiescence in the head center, so that you can actually listen and hear 100%, rather than having to compete with the voice of your inner critic or whatever program's running through your head at the moment. So 3 centers, and so as Bill Wilson would say, hence in this life we shall attain nothing like perfect humility and love. So we shall have to settle respecting most of our problems for a very gradual progress, punctuated sometimes by heavy setbacks. Now that is real and true. He knows the journey. So if you think about this sort of interesting cartoon, like, your plan. It's like, I'm just going to go straight over to my flat. This is going to be easy. This would be my long-term sobriety. Then you look at the reality of this little guy down in the corner, and he falls into some kind of trap, and then, he's attacked by an eagle, and then he's got to, navigate across another abyss. There's all of these things that occur that aren't so easy or predictable. That's recovery. That's life on life's terms, right? So just a thought about this. A lot of times when people come to learn about the Enneagram, their first primary wish is, how can I change my partner so they're easier to live with, right? That's like number one. And then there's me. But if I can just fix my partner, man, most of my problems will disappear, right? So this wild guy, Andy Warhol, said, when people are ready to change, they change. They never do it before then, and sometimes they die before they get around to it. You can't make them change if they don't want to. Just like when they do want to, you can't stop them. So, one of the principles that the Enneagram teaches is this idea, and it's very similar to AA, which is, I can work on myself. I got my hands full with me, even though there's a lot of interesting people that I would like to change, because it's easier to focus on them. Part of the work of the Enneagram is really taking whatever wisdom you have and using it to change yourself, and not to bother your beloved wife if you can help it. And then perhaps wisdom is realizing how small I am and unwise, and how far I have yet to go. And one of the things that I notice about learning about the Enneagram is this lesson. If you really start to learn to observe yourself, you will develop, shockingly, deeper and deeper humility, and realizing how often you're actually on automatic pilot, being unconscious and not noticing it. Now, the good thing about noticing your own frailties or defense patterns is that you start to develop compassion for other people, because you realize it's really hard to change. It's not an easy thing. And the wish to help others always begins with oneself. Our own experience is the only thing we have to share. Other than that, we can't pretend to be more awake or more compassionate than we actually are. And this really captures, the principles in recovery. I can share my experience, strength, and hope, but it's limited. I only have a small lens on what the potential is for understanding reality. So we have 9 types, and one of them is basically our dominant type, and that's part of your work, is to find out what that is. You may notice in the beginning that you discover there's 2 types that are pretty close, but with more work, a little closer looking, you'll probably arrive at 1. So what is our personality? What is this personality type we're talking about? Well, it's our habitual thoughts, emotional reactions, habitual behaviors. They're the habits of personality that we have naturally become over-identified with. So, just to be clear, this is more than a psychology of personality types, because your type is not who you are. I'm a type 4, which means that I have a tendency to see life through the lens of the 4 capacities, but who I am is deeper and more real, so to speak. You'd say that the personality is kind of the cloak we took on to navigate life and be able to maneuver around and with people. And part of the work is beginning to see that who I am is much deeper than that particular veil, you could call it. So, that said, I like to think of us or myself as a crystal with many facets. And the way I look at inner work is that, with all these facets, I figure today I've cleaned off about 25% of them, and the other 75% are still obscured. So out of the lens of those 25 facets that are awake and clean, that's how I see reality. Meaning, as my teacher says, relax, Michael, you miss most everything. If you get 25% of what is here available in the moment, you've made progress. So there's something around easy do it. Don't strive for perfection. So I want to talk about this graphic called the levels of development, or the levels of health. And as you can see, there are 9 levels. And at the top, we have this word essence. And the story is that with each type, there are actually 9 levels of health. And that the healthier I am, the more I reside up at level 1, 2, and 3. Where I tend to reside, most of us, is around level 4 and 5, which is kind of our learned way of responding to life via our type. And 7, 8, 9 is serious pathological suffering. So the goal, if there was one, first off, is just to get present to where you are without judging yourself. But the second goal is to begin to create enough awareness that your habits of personality don't always rule you and take you in a predictable, unhappy fashion or in a way that harms others. That's a life work. I figure it'd probably take about 10 lifetimes, but hey, who's counting the time? So we can say to start off with that we all have, in a sense, a center of gravity. And you'll understand this more when I start talking about the attributes of each of the levels. But that we have a center of gravity, and on a good day, our better angels show up. So just to give you an example, I can go to a workshop, get really relaxed, and suddenly, in the midst of a lot of love and a lot of kindness, my grievances against this and that person disappear, and I have this moment of realizing that they're really lovely people doing the best they can, just like me. So I'm at the workshop, and then I come home, and about 4 or 5 days pass. And as I've gotten home, my kids look beautiful. I can see their beauty. And at day 5, I start to see what ticks me off about them, and I start chewing on my complaints again. So we say that you can move up the levels of health to a more enlightened awareness, but you have a default that you tend to come back to until you've done enough inner work to move this center of gravity up. So that on the other side, I can drop down below my center of gravity, which is like those great moments when I'm on the road and I'm, just driving along and someone cuts me off, and I forget that I've cut people off 1,000 times, and I think, what is wrong with you, you idiot? And I go into my own tirade, not realizing or remembering, oh, I've done that too. So I can drop down to a less aware place. And if I catch myself in the act, I might come back to reality and go, we're all just doing the best we can. So the purpose of these levels of health is to begin to understand, based on my type, where am I living today, or where have I traveled today? So when we go through the type 8, you're going to have a chance to see that there are specific behaviors that show up when I'm in the healthy range, when I'm in the average range, and when I'm unhealthy. So that said, we'll talk about the passion of the type. Now I'll give more information on this. It's the heart's response to being shut down as kids, the heart's way of coping generated by our basic fear of our type. Ultimately, it says that everybody on some level has experienced a broken heart and have had to create an adaptive response to that suffering to survive in their lives. So let's just add a little to this. So when someone's at level 1, 2, and 3, we call that the healthy range. And based on their type, they're manifesting the best and most positive of their personality patterns. Overall, there tends to be a greater acceptance of people's foibles, less perfectionism pointed to myself or other people, often a deep wish to try to, a great wish to contribute to the best of others. And based on my type, I will have a certain skill set that allows me to do that. And more capacity to really feel compassion for the suffering of the world and my own suffering. So it's a great place to be. People living at level 1, 2, and 3 usually feel a deep sense of connectivity with people around them, sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, a sense of being held by humanity and being a part of it. Now, all the types, when they're healthy, can manifest these level 1, 2, and 3 capacities. When I start to get caught up in fear, anger, shame, embarrassment, etc., each of the types will start to drop down the levels to level 4, 5, and 6. And at level 4, basically, I have a social act that I call on to navigate life. I'm not present in the way I am at level 1, 2, and 3, but I'm not getting in people's way either. But at level 5, as I'm compensating for suffering I haven't processed as a little boy or girl, or I'm in the moment feeling really activated or hurt, level 5 we call the level of manipulation. And each of the types at level 5 basically draws on their manipulative capacity to get other people to do their will. So at level 5 on down, I'm starting to get more self-centered. At level 6, we call, level 6 is the level of the pain in the ass. And we call it this because all the types, when they're down at level 6 and they're struggling with their suffering and they're unconscious, has their own particular way that they really begin to aggravate people and really get aggressive. It could be passive aggressive, it could be directly aggressive, but ultimately, the catch in all of this is at level 5 on down, people can't see that they're behaving in a way that's less than positive or becoming or healthy. And instead, they have this impression that I'm being the healthy one and the rest of you are just being ordinary idiots. I wish you would wake up, right? So level 5 on down, my ability to observe myself and other people accurately disappears, which is why, of course, we need each other as observers of our strange and weird behavior when we get triggered. So there's something we call the wake-up call. And the wake-up call happens between level 3 and 4, and each type has a wake-up call that if they're aware of it, it signals to them, I'm going down the levels into my habitual, neurotic, learned behavior. I better put the brakes on here. So each type has a wake-up call, and we'll talk about the type 8s today as we go through that style. So after we get sober, then what? That's when healing our addiction to type patterns begins. So the Enneagram identifies the doorways to growth that invite deeper connection with self, source, and our inherent joy and love. And opening these doors is pivotal to sustainable sobriety. And I say that because I've been around for 42 years, and I've just been aghast at how many people, after 20, 30, or 40 years, relapse and disappear into their addiction without identifying what it is that captured their attention and took them down the levels. So part of the work of the Enneagram is to help people understand that they will be coming face to face with certain aspects of their personality that if they're prepared for it, they will navigate it and move through it and gain the gifts from it. So that said, I want to open up and see if we have some questions, anything that needs to be explained, because that's a lot of information you may have never seen before. So Cheryl, are you the gatekeeper on people asking questions, or how should we do this? And
yes, so people will raise their hands and then I'll just call on them in the order that they have.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Great presentation. I've been multitasking, so I was really curious about the different levels. The level where it's unhealthy. How does one find their way back when it's unhealthy?
Well, the first skill that needs to be learned is self-observation, so that I can actually learn to observe myself and see that I'm down the levels. Now, down at the unhealthy, we've got healthy, average, unhealthy. Unhealthy usually requires that I get outside help to help me come back into reality. But as I move, so when people come into recovery, they're down at level 7 many times, and they're just in a terrible mess, and they go to rehab or they start AA, and they've got lots of support for helping them come to and become more real. But as they move up the levels, I can only tell you that what has been so important for me is to have people I trust in my life who I give permission to let me know when I'm starting to go down the levels into my unconscious patterns. And so for a type 4, that can be that I start dropping into a little bit too much self-pity and kind of feeling entitled. And, my teacher would say, I can hear the angels playing that song on Michael's self-pity. Can you hear that right now? And so it gets pointed out to me and they go, oh, you're right. Thank you for sharing that with me. So in the beginning, as having really trusted friends who know my patterns and who I give permission to compassionately point them out. And then as I get more skillful, I start to notice them myself and can pull myself out of it. So, that it's a slow but steady process from being asleep to more and more awake.
Mine is quite similar to that. I've had quite a few mental health difficulties. I'm still sober, but I'm really struggling with just day-to-day life. I'm struggling to even go out places. I had family situations at the weekend. I was supposed to go to a barbecue, which I avoided because I just didn't feel I could cope. And then there was another one which was in the village. Now, all my family are going to these two places. So my daughter said to me, "Oh, just walk round, Mum, and just come round for a short time." And by the time I got there, I was literally shaking, couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
The anxiety was just overpowerful, and my daughter had to walk back home with me. I was in such a panic.
Yeah.
And it's been getting like worse over the last week. I mean, obviously, I'm phoning my doctor tomorrow because I don't know whether I need to increase medication.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I've been going through the whole of my life a constant grieving, like grieving from my childhood that
Yeah.
because I had an abusive childhood, and grieving with my first marriage. My first husband was very abusive as well, and I was a Catholic and got divorced, so I was sort of grieving for the loss of my religion. So at the same time, I lost everything. So, you know, and I feel like I've lost my mum, and I've been in a relationship 37 years, and again, I'm getting got divorced. So I feel like I'm in a constant grieving pattern and a constant dislike of myself that I just don't, I'm fearful.
And do you know what your Enneagram type is at this point?
No, I have no idea.
Okay. So I would, and I don't know how we can get this, Cheryl, the Quest test, if I could send you the copy of it and send it out to people, but first understanding what your type is can help a lot.
Yeah.
And then, when you have an overpowering pattern of sadness or fear, the first thing that comes to mind for me is I have to not try to do this by myself, but I need to have support around me who can kind of hold my hand until I start to feel more confident myself. And also, you mentioned a lot of sadness, and I know in my recovery, I have done tons of grieving and just wailing from the bottom of my toes to the top of my head over losses. But if I didn't really have support around me as I was doing that grieving, I wouldn't have been able to release that suffering. So, these are big things that you're working up against. But it's only to say that, getting the right medication can help. But also, if you know your type, it's going to give you some clues on how to begin to relax some of your patterns.
There's been times in my life where I believed that I was beyond human aid.
Mm-hmm.
So this gives me hope. But I also wonder about a lot of people that I'm related to, surrounded by, just in life, there are different types. And I wonder, like, is there a certain part of the population that maybe cannot go back up, up past a certain level, or is there like limitations in that way, or is the human being able to achieve that regardless of how low they may be?
Well, I have, if the wish is strong, and that's the first requirement for going up to levels. And then the next one is really finding little by little what is it that starts to ease my suffering and starts to relax this idea that, I'm more broken than others or I'm hopeless. Because on some level, if you really get to know people at depth, most often there's something inside them that feels like I'm just not lovable, and they just don't talk about it. And other people are more in touch with that, and so they suffer more immediately from that kind of awareness. But I would just encourage you, if you find this information useful, to think about getting a book called The Wisdom of the Enneagram and reading and finding out what your type is, because there is when I started this work, I was at the bottom of the pit, and I thought there is no way I'll ever get up these levels. And I did, with lots of love and support and intelligence, and you're a young lady, this is all doable, it's all learnable. It's just a matter of getting the right teaching and the right understanding. So I have a lot of faith in that process. So find out what your type is, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
My question is, as a 4, and I'm like, dun, da, 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 I got the nurse's hat on for my whole family. I've always been that way. I can help you. I can help you. I'm not a 2, I'm a 4, but I really have a strong component. I wish I could package this in a way that would be palatable for family members or loved ones that I live with, like a husband. And I wondered if you have found a phrase or a way of speaking about it in 1 or 2 sentences that make it interesting to people. Because I think some people are so resistant to feeling typecast. Don't you pigeonhole me, I'm not taking a test. I'm wondering if you've got clients like that, how do you work with that resistance or incite their curiosity?
Yeah, well, great question, and a couple of things come up. One is, if there's a way I can get people curious without sort of quietly suggesting you really need this because you're kind of messed up, but any kind of edge like that, and they're going to go, no, thank you. But the more you develop a peace in your own heart and soul, more equanimity, less self-judgment, they're going to get curious about that. Like, what's going on? You seem like you're doing a lot better. And then you say, well, this thing called the Enneagram really helped me. So there's something about whenever I've tried to get somebody to get interested in it, it never happens, right? But when I just be myself, and the right people might see me and feel drawn, and then I'll ask about it. When I work with clients, I always invite them, would you like to learn about your patterns? And most of the time they're really excited. Of course, they've come to counseling and they've been suffering and they want some ways out. But with family members, there's always this hidden thing like you're trying to change me. And so I just have to be careful. I'm not very preachy about it with my family, but I notice they come to it on their own. If they see that I'm feeling better and they get curious. So if there's a way to talk about it without having any judgment or a plan, if in your head you're going, my plan really is for my husband, is he's going to become a happier man. They smell that out in 3 seconds flat. So, so it's an experiment, and, you'll find out what works for you. So, let's go forward. So we divide the types into the instinctive center types, which is 8, 9, and 1, feeling center types, heart types, 2, 3, and 4, thinking center types, 5, 6, and 7. Now, all of us have instincts, and all of us have a heart, and all of us have a very busy head center. But, if your type is located in a particular center, it just means you have a few more issues than everybody else does. But nobody gets a free pass on this stuff. And this is a photo of a powerful instinctive center being expressed through the body. So when we talk about the instinctive center, we say that 8, 9, and 1 tend to have a strong need for autonomy and respect. And when they're healthy, they give autonomy and respect. When they're feeling constrained or afraid or hurt, the core message that they exude in their own style is, I don't want to be messed with. Don't mess with me. And the 8, 9, and 1 each has a different way that they do that, where they create kind of a boundary or a border around themselves and say, you're not welcome unless I give you permission. Now, all of us have little bits of that. 8, 9, and 1, that's a core pattern for them. So along with it is a connection with particular emotional states. And for 8, 9, and 1, there's this challenge about learning how to express anger and rage in a healthy way, in a way that isn't unconscious, it doesn't get projected onto others, or in which we bury our anger and rage. And the 8, 9, and 1, each one of them has a slightly different challenge for how I deal with my anger. Now, all the types have anger, and all the types can have rage, but this focus around anger and rage for the 8, 9, and 1 is a very powerful starting spot for them. So we call the 8 the challenger, or the lion-hearted protector. We've got Johnny Cash, we've got Wahlberg, both actors who struggled with addiction in one form or another. Wahlberg's been sober for many years, and Johnny Cash died that way. Denzel Washington, this movie Flight really captures the dynamics of addiction, and he becomes a sober man at the end. Then we have Kamala Harris, who is a powerful, healthy type 8. If you've heard her speak, you will notice as I talk about the qualities of the 8 that she just exudes them in spades. And then we have this amazing guy, Nick Cave, who's written a book called Faith, Hope, and Carnage, and he's identified himself as a type 8, and powerful, gutsy, authentic musician. And then we've got Alec Baldwin, and then Keith Richards. And Keith Richards, I think, will probably live for, he'll be the one person who does not die on the planet. He's just got some kind of resiliency that no one else does. And then a little type 8 humor. And this dragon has just fried his buddy, and he says, if I tell you it's a sign of affection, then it's a sign of affection. I can't help it if you're flammable. And if you're a type 8, you know from time to time that you scorch people, and they're like, oh my God, you just incinerated me. So the lion-hearted protector has the qualities of being powerful and domineering and dominating. And when I'm healthy, I use that power to empower other people. And 8s tend to have a natural self-confidence and an instinctive capacity to make decisions and to not sort of sit on the border like a type 9 might. And when I'm less healthy and I'm caught up in hurt or fear, I can become very willful and confrontational. So let's just take a look at sort of the core of the 8. We say that little type 8 kids appear to be born with a kind of innate strength and aliveness. And I know in my wife's Montessori school, the little type 8 kids come in and they're like, let's climb the trees. Let's see if we can get up on the roof there. Oh, I bet you we can jump off. Like there's this sense of, let's just press the edge of what is safe and get into the risk, because that invigorates me. So there's a natural vitality. We say type 8s have, are endowed with more energy than most of the other types. And there's a kind of forcefulness, a robust kind of fire in them to get stuff done and to take action. And at their best, they're very real. They spot and can feel a lie, and it just activates their whole gut center when someone's BSing them. It's like a flame goes off inside them, and they tend to, confront the person, because that's one of their Jedi gifts, is to confront people. So for the type 8, little kid had to develop an ego structure, as we all do, which means that some of our innate capacities get blocked or shunted or quieted, depending on whether we're in an abusive relationship or not growing up. So for the type 8, and all the types have to disengage from their full essence, it seems to be part of God's sense of humor, and develop a personality, a protective shell, which again becomes fertilizer for the rebirth of themselves when they're older. So the basic fear of the 8 is of being destroyed or dead or lifeless, of being violated. And if you ask type 8s if they have that kind of fear, and this is really the core of the core fear, to say, I'm not afraid of anything, bring it on, right? But my fear, secondary fear, is the one I feel the most. And that's of becoming weak or vulnerable, losing my strength and independence. Like, do not mess with my independence and my way of being in the world. And there's also kind of an inner critic message that says, thou shalt not be weak or vulnerable. So, each type has an inner critic message. And for the 8, it's like, be strong or you're not lovable. So they naturally have that capacity to be strong, and their tendency is to overuse it to feel secure. So ultimately their real desire is to feel real strength and to be real and alive. But as a little one, it turns into naturally a kind of self-protective thing where I feel like I've got to protect myself because people aren't trustable, or I have experiences where people violate my trust. But there's this sense of I'm on my own and I got to take care of business myself. So radical independence from the type 8. Their self-image, which is often accurate, even if they're neurotically caught up in their patterns, is I'm powerful, strong, direct, robust, independent, resourceful. So it's a real can-do. I'm going to tell you exactly where I am and where I'm going. Either jump on the boat with me or just get out of the way because I'm coming through, and lightweights will not be tolerated on this journey. So there's this way, when I'm healthy as an 8, I'm thinking of particular folks, Martin Luther King, if you ever watched any of the work he's done, and he did that one particular speech in Washington called I Have a Dream. And it's like every word came from the core of his being and just, rattled the rafters and people around. There's this sense of ignited aliveness. When I'm healthy as an 8, I'm there to empower everyone around me. Those who are persecuted, those who don't have rights. If you listen to Kamala Harris and her presentation and last week, this whole thing of protecting those folks who can't protect themselves. That's the very best of the type 8. So we can say that when the type 8 loses contact with that beautiful, powerful heart, or when they've been hurt, or when they've been pressed down and unable to really sort of be themselves, we say they develop something called a passion. And the passion for the 8 is lust. And lust means intensity. So that as a habit of personality, the type 8 under stress or any kind of threat, or if they've been hurt, comes out roaring like a dragon, right? It's not, they don't disappear and you don't see them vanish over the horizon. They come out and they take on whatever's there. And if they need to incinerate you, well, they will. It's for your own good. But there's this way that I start to lose contact with how much force I bring to bear in a given moment. And part of my work is to begin to sort out, why is it that I overuse this instinctive energy? What is it I'm trying to protect? Why do I go there so easily? And usually it has to do with protecting my own hurt heart and ways I felt not cared for. So we say the wake-up call for the 8 is noticing when I'm using too much force. My voice is loud, my body gets big, I start sort of, becoming mountainous in a conversation with somebody. And I've seen 8s do this where, they're sitting there talking with a friend and they've grown to the size of a mountain. The friend's kind of wilting down. And I'll say, Tom, can you see they're scaring the shit out of him right now? And he says, what do you mean? I'm just expressing how I feel. He says, no, you're incinerating him right now. You must learn to notice that. And that becomes a challenge for the type 8. And we say that overuse of too much energy, too much robustness, what 8s will say is that there's something that feels really good and activating when I'm expressing that robustness, even if it's not in service of the good. And we say at the core of it is a dying, raging heart. That on some level, when the little type 8 had to separate from their sense of faith in humanity, that the result was this capacity to make sure no one will ever violate me the way that I feel right now. So the movement is towards the magnanimous lion heart, and that means opening to compassion and tenderness and vulnerability. And type 8s, when they first start opening to vulnerability, will say, it feels like every time I let you into my heart that I'm going to be killed, that I can't really trust that I can be vulnerable right now, and that you will hold that heart of mine with kindness. It says every time so I've worked with so many 8s in recovery, as they start to open up their heart and feel sadness, they'll recoil back and go, man, I'm not going to let you get this close because I'm going to just get beat up like I did when I was a little guy. So all of that can be navigated, for sure. So we say the path of transformation is the path of self-surrender. I let my guard down. I start to trust people. at least people close to me. Let them see my soul. So that said, as we look at the essential quality of strength and awareness, in the top 3 levels, level 1, 2, and 3, we have these great qualities: being strong, empowering, leading, being bold, being truthful. Type 8s are the ones that if they say they're going to get something done, they get it done. This capacity to expand and to use their abilities to broaden their ability to impact the world. And also, ultimately, there's a wish, a deep soul wish, to really impact and empower humanity. That's the kind of the highest aspect of this type 8. But as I drop down to level 4, where I start to disconnect from my sense of safety, my sense of my own lovableness, being humiliated, etc., what starts to come online for me is this need to be hard driving and competing. I'm not just going to beat the competition, I'm going to crush them. So there's this sense that I must take charge of and be in charge of my resources, whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish, and I've got to go full bore to make it happen. So again, I'm powering up because on some level, I'm protecting my heart. So we say that from level 5, right here, I become dominating. I'm the boss. It's my way or the highway. You don't even have to question that. It's just a fact. I know what comes next. I know what needs to be done. So you can either join me or you can take a hike. There's no room for wobbling here. So at level 5 to 9, I have here in the right corner, I believe that no one can really be trusted, that I must fight to survive, that I must rely on oneself, on no one but myself. And ultimately, we say, as the 8 moves down the levels, there's a deeper and deeper sense of I'm not really wanted. And one of the ways the type 8 deals with it is like, well, I don't care if you want me. I don't want you. I never did. So bug off, right? It's like, instead of getting hurt by it, it's like, who needs you? I got plenty. I got everything I need. So as I get more tight, more hurt, unable to feel it, I start to become intimidating. And Richard Rohr talked about men who are out of contact with their heart. He says the more distant they are from their own heart, the more intimidating and confrontational they are to compensate for their suffering. So this is what happens for the 8. The 8 goes from being healthy, strong, brave, empowering others, to then becoming combative, confrontational, and scaring people. So down the levels, become tyrannical and ruthless, terrorizing, remorseless. Like down at level 7, 8, 9, it's like my law is the only law I have to follow. I can be a rule breaker because because I have this sort of self-image that I am almost like God. So, this is the criminal mind down the levels. I can do what I want. I can harm who I want to harm. At level 9, destroying, whether it's, a murderous rage or that's actually taking somebody out. But down the levels, this orientation towards violence gets stronger and stronger. So I become addicted to intensity at the higher levels, and then I get addicted to violence down the levels. So that said, I see there's some questions popping up here. Let me see what's next. Okay, let's see what kind of questions we have.
It has been a challenge for me to be vulnerable. There are a group of women that I really trust.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's plus my age. At 66 years old, I'm more discreet in who I share my vulnerability with. Yeah. Do you have any comment to that?
Well, that's certainly the growth path for 8. And, all of this move from being independent and sort of self-reliant and not, almost like denying any kind of need I have for vulnerable connection. One works through that inch by inch. It's a slow process where you trust somebody and you share a little bit more, and then you recoil and go, oh my God, that was too much. I gave him too much. But slowly but surely, you will begin to feel your deep need for kindness and affection and love. And part of the pattern for the 8 is they get some kind of message as a little kid that isn't an option for them, that they're on their own, right? And they got to be tough. They got to be the strong one. They got to be the leader. And also may have had lessons with, adults or other kids where you were betrayed and realized, unless I'm taking care of myself, I'm not going to be okay. So when you say you have friends now that you're sharing with, it sounds like you develop trust over time. And now, the challenge is if you start to feel tears coming, is to try to allow yourself to feel them a little bit longer than your habit of pulling back. Letting that young part of you come forward and show itself. There's other things along the way. I'm going to look at maybe 6 or 7 things at the end here that you can maybe think about, and in terms of how do I trust my soft heart, because 8s usually have big hearts. They care deeply, but they also don't want anybody to mess with that heart. So it's a conundrum, and every type has a conundrum. So I'll bet you that Cheryl could add a little bit to this process. You have a fellow 8.
I just want to say ditto. Yeah, I mean, yes. And so what the Enneagram has helped me with is just that I kind of relax into my true self, and that is loving and caring and all those things that used to be I couldn't at all. So that has helped me. And I'm 20 years in recovery. And I finally reached the point that I really needed something beyond, in addition to the 12 steps, I should say, to soften whatever that is. And that's what it feels like. I just feel softer. So, Michael, there is a question that came in, and I'm going to summarize it. Several people asked this question. Can you be 2 Enneagram types, one that you show to the public and one that is private?
Well, that's a great question. And so down the road, we'll talk about the arrows, right? So the type 8 on the Enneagram, if you're looking at the graph, has a line to 2 and a line to 5. And so some, the line to 2 is when I become softer and more gentle. And a lot of times the 8s will say they develop that capacity with people they trust, close friends, that kind of softer part. The line to 5 is going into, a deep laser-like study of information and working with it. And so some 8s will say, there's times when that 5 comes out. That doesn't make me a 5, does it? Says, no, that's just a capacity that you draw on. Or when I'm at home, 8s will often say I'm a lot softer at home than when I'm out in the world. But that doesn't make me a 2. If I was a 2, I'd be soft out in the world, getting confused, taking care of people that I shouldn't. It just means that I have these qualities that are available to me that I can access. But it doesn't mean I'm a different type. Yeah.
What I'm finding really hard, Michael, is like, I haven't come across the Enneagram as much, but the Myers-Briggs and any of these self-assessing tests, I just think, I don't know. I'm that, right?
Right.
Like, so you just talked about 2 and 8, and I could be a 2 strongly, and I could be an 8 strongly. And I think that maybe that's an issue, but I don't know, you could explain. Like, if you don't know your needs and wants because you've abandoned yourself for so long, you kind of don't know yourself. So in a way, this assumes you need to know yourself quite well to be able to define what number you are. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. There's certain types that have this characteristic of identifying with all the types. So they go, oh my God, which type I am? I feel them all. Well, you're probably a 6 or a 9. But that said, part of the work is getting the sort of an understanding of how the structure of each type operates. And as you start to get eyes to see that, you'll start to see your behavior more clearly as it fits into a type. So that can be a process. Sometimes it takes people 6 months to 2 years because there's so many affinities with all the types, because we have all the patterns in us. But as we get more skillful at observing ourselves, we'll notice, there is one that's usually really strong, and then another one that which we sometimes call the wing, that might be strong too. So I would just say, I would just suggest that you take the quest test and find out what the top 3 scores are, and then to do some reading up on it to see, your affinity and your disconnect from each of the types. And you'll come to it over time. And ultimately, if you have a beloved partner, they can help you spot your type even quicker than yourself, because they see all your behaviors. Whereas, when we're trying to see our own behaviors, it's much easier to watch my wife and see her behaviors and tell her what she needs to improve than to see my own. So if you have some allies around you, they can help you. And there was a question. The book I mentioned was The Wisdom of the Enneagram. There's other books, but that is my favorite. So, all right. So what I'd like to do is go through some more of these slides, because it looks like we're getting close to the end, and I want to take a look at some of the suggestions for the type 8, and then see if I can answer some more questions. So we say the type 8 identifies powerfully with a sense of intensity that comes from resisting or challenging others. They love to resist, they love to challenge. It's just how they're wired. They resist recognizing their own vulnerability and need for nurturing. And this has been pointed to a couple times. The path of surrender, or the path of transformation is self-surrender. Maybe I could let my heart be touched more deeply. Maybe I could let down my guard a little bit more. That's the doorway, that's the path. So I'm going to do a quick shift here. If you're an 8, feeling screwed is not the same as being screwed. Check your automatic impulse to retaliate until you've checked out the situation, right? Because there's that part of me that just jumps in, feels like you're doing something to me, and I can actually be too impulsive in following that instinctual reading of a situation. Become an even more powerful 8 by expanding your arsenal to include listening and negotiation. And if you've been around 8s, sometimes they'll say, okay, everybody share, and then they share, and they share it in such a way, it's like all the other ideas get obliterated by the force and power and passion of their sharing. So learning to listen and to hold back a little bit can be really helpful. Choose your battles. Ask yourself, is this worth it? Because there's a part of the 8s that kind of like the battle. Before you bulldoze with someone, ask yourself whether you're willing to deal with the consequences. Meaning, slow down, take a breath, and see if this is the battle you really want to take on. And maybe the consequences, like having to apologize or being fired. For many people, your threats, tirades, and tantrums are not effective, no matter how enjoyable they may be for you. Be specific about what action on the part of the person you are threatening. Be specific about what action on the part of the person you are threatening will actually satisfy you. Meaning, what's the point of your retaliation? Is it to accomplish a goal, or is it just because it makes me feel good to intimidate? Don't assume it's okay for you to intrude. And this is a big one for the 8. It's like, when I feel the truth, I must let you know what it is, and I might have to brand you on your forehead just so you really get it, because I feel, 8s feel things strongly, immediate, like now. When should I share this? Right now. There's no other time. Right now. So be specific. Don't assume it's okay to intrude. Ask permission. Now, do 8s like to ask permission? No, they do not. Like, why would I ask you permission when I already know what the right thing is? Be diplomatic. Can I come in? May I offer a suggestion? So it's a way of slowing down the natural momentum that I seem to be wired with. Find ways of drawing on the talents of others. And this is really a powerful thing for 8s, as they get healthier and they really attune to, how do I ignite and bring to awareness the gifts of the people around me? The healthiest of the 8s are always trying to find a way to bring people into their full power, and they're really good at it. Be aware that your impulse to excoriate someone or eviscerate them may be a sign of your own insecurity about keeping control or fear of your own vulnerabilities. And be aware that exhausting yourself through rage or essential indulgences may be a way of avoiding uncomfortable, real issues. So I want to just, again, open up for questions because we've got about 10 minutes here, and just see, are there eights that haven't revealed themselves that need to kind of let out the dragon in them so we know you're there? Or...
I did your chart, and I've been in recovery for about 20 years, and I have a huge, I think I might be an 8. I thought I was a 2, but the resistance is so powerful in me about sponsors. I can't do it. It's like, but I can work with other people as equals in a program, but I feel threatened about sponsors.
And is it because you don't want them to, boss you around or tell you what to do? Or
well,
what?
I don't want them to expect me to do something that I maybe not want to do, and I have a tendency of not speaking up for myself.
Okay.
And I want to speak up for myself, but sometimes I have a hard time with the words. But then I go into that other aspect of getting angry and getting irritated at people, and I don't even know I did it. So I just don't. I think I heard a lot of stuff about myself in 8, and I thought I was 2.
Well, you might be a 2 that goes to 8. So the other thing I haven't mentioned in terms of books is my favorite book is the one I wrote called The Alchemy of the Enneagram and Transforming Addiction. And so Kim and whoever else, yes, thank you, Cheryl. That has everything I've been talking about is there. So I would invite you, 2 and 8 have aligned to each other in the Enneagram. So they can, you may find as a type 2 that if you're a type 2, that you may go along or not say anything and not say anything. And then after a while, you finally explode and tell everybody to F off. But you're really a 2 that's afraid to say, hey, wait a second, I don't want to do that. That seems like bullshit. And let's come up with another idea. And 2s tend to be nice and nice and nice, and then they explode. So it may be that you're a 2 that after you've been too nice for too long comes out fighting.
I had a question on this, on the levels. Usually I can look at a diagram like this and really know or have a pretty good idea of where I am right now. And I'm looking at it right now and I'm not sure. And I think the reason I'm not sure is probably because I've been retired for about 9 months or so. And I recognize the way I acted when I was working, but now I'm busy. I'm volunteering for a lot of things. I'm doing a lot of service work, but I act differently when I'm a volunteer than when I was getting paid for what I did. So
yeah.
I'm just wondering, I sort of intuitively feel like I'm at this level 3 of empowering and leading, but I don't really feel like I'm leading anybody. I'm just helping, and wanting to be, I'm acting like a 2.
Yeah.
But it's because I want to, not because I need something from it. So I just wonder if you could comment on that.
Well, I would say is that the direction of growth for the 8 is going to 2. And it sounds like you're, and 2s, when they're healthy, love to give and love to contribute to other people. And sounds like that's what's showing up for you right now. You're that kind of forceful, being the leader, etc. As you mature, as any 8 matures, they start noticing that they start taking on the qualities of the arrow of integration. So it sounds like you're being more 2ish and less forceful, not taking on leadership as much as helping people. So that to me sounds good. I think you're headed in the right direction.
I identify myself as an 8.
All right.
It's very 8, and it's very easy to see. Like when I read the book, or when I knew right away. Of course, my favorite sport is boxing or bodybuilding. Like I'm a big musician in Germany, known, and I've been always leading my life.
Yeah.
And the idea of being vulnerable and just trusting someone scares me. And you know what I'm saying? Like, and I've been doing a minute, and I've been, I know different levels, and I love the idea of slowing down. Thank you thank you very much for reminding me on choose your battles wisely. See if you want to deal with the consequences, because my natural instinct is always to trigger the person who I'm dealing with. I know what they're capable of. Most of the times they don't know, right? And I'm like, if I say it to them, I provoke them to be the best. Let's see if they react, right? And I hurt people with that, and I can push people away with that. So I appreciate it. We have a little group in Berlin of guys. We work with the Enneagram book, AA guys, and I am super grateful for the book recommendation, Michael. Thank you very much for it. We're gonna read into it, and I just want to say thank you for the beautiful reminders, and just share that as an 8. Just the idea of, oh my God, I might not be the strongest guy one day. Oh, that scares the shit out. Just the idea, scares the shit out of me. But hey, it is what it is. At the day at the time. Just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're really welcome. And some of my best friends are type 8s, and we have an agreement that when they get sort of in dragon mode, that I give them a signal that says, you're scorching me. And so what I do is I squat down all the way to the floor, and I go, you're scaring the shit out of me right now. And they go, oh, Naylor, thank you for reminding me. So sometimes it helps to have somebody just give you some kind of signal if you're because 8s can be overpowering. When they're helping people, they can even eviscerate them. So, if you got a good men's group there, they can really support you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Cheryl, for your work tonight. And I identify shortly, I must say, with an 8. 25 years ago, I made acquaintance with the Enneagram, and I was hesitating between the 1 and the 4. And now I did the test in English. It's not my mother tongue, as you can hear. But now I did the test in English, and it came out that I can identify strongly with the 8. And that gave me a huge push in my recovery, because since 4 years, I am in ACA. I'm an adult child of a dysfunctional family. And when I was a child, my mother and my stepfather, merely my stepfather, said, you are a rotten child. And I grew up with this deep ingrained idea of being a rotten child. Yeah. And I thought it was because of my dysfunctional family. But now I know I am wired that way. I am strong, and I am specific, and I am direct. I'm Dutch as well, so hello, directness. But it gives me such a relief to see it in this light. So I would like to say thank you for you and for Cheryl and for the Enneagram. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. One of the things that 8s often say is that when they were little boys or little girls, they took in some message that they were inherently bad. And so, you work through that and turned it towards really what the truth is. You're strong and direct, and that's such a beautiful quality. So thank you for sharing that.
Okay, it looks like we've hit the end of time. Michael, thank you so much for all that you've done. Once again, I don't know how to get you access to Surrender School's WhatsApp page. I don't know how to do that. So if somebody else does, if you could put it up for everyone to grab that. I don't even know how to do that. So thank you, Joy, for doing that. And once again, next month, we'll put the schedule up on Patrick's, on the Friendly Circle Berlin's. The schedule will be out there. I think it may be there, but it's part of the flyer. It shows that. And Michael really, I asked him the question, do you want just the type that is that type to go that month? And he said, no, everybody can go to all of them, because we all have all of it. And once we feel compassion in ourselves for that type's behavior in ourselves, we can feel compassion for the others. I did post the quote that's on the bottom of Michael's email out there that talks about being equals. So go ahead and grab that if you want. We won't shut down chat right now. And I think that's it. Michael, anything you wanted to add at the end?
No, just really great to be with you, and look forward to connecting again soon. So thank you. Many blessings.
Michael, do you want to end with a little prayer or something?
Well, yeah, let's just take a moment and find your breath. You can have your eyes open or closed, whichever feels best. And then just to settle in your body for a moment. And then to bring to mind someone who you love, and to imagine them inhabiting the center of your heart, and just holding them with your affection and kindness and gratitude, and just to abide in this feeling for a few moments. And then to send that love out into the world in any way you visualize it. Like your center, your heart is the sun shining out your loving nature to the world. Thank you.